Yeah, several months ago, Shannon Liebengood recommended a book to me. Shannon's on our executive leadership team, oversees spiritual growth and our discipleship ministries across all of our locations. Shannon is really bright and really well read. So when she says, hey, you got to read this book, I try to pick it up. And the book was Drop the Stones by Carlos Rodriguez. It's one of my favorite books that I read. Throughout the summer, it was the inspiration for this teaching series. Carlos was here last week. He kicked off our series. I really valued some of the one-on-one time that I got to spend with him. Really interesting, strong believer. And I loved his sermon last weekend. And I know I probably say this from time up to time, hey, if you missed last week, you got to go back on the website and watch it. I'm going to say it again. If you missed last week, seriously, go back and check out his sermon. Watch it. He took us to this powerful moment that's recorded in John 8, where the religious leaders of the day, they catch this woman in the act of adultery. They bring her to the temple where Jesus is. They basically throw her at Jesus' feet, and they want her put to death. They want her stoned to death. And with everyone gathered there and everyone watching, Jesus says this incredibly powerful line to the crowd. Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. And it says, it's recorded at first, some of the older, wiser guys, some of the, they understand that they've got sin and they've had sin and they drop their stone. It says then, eventually the younger generation drops their stones. So it's just Jesus and her. And he says to her, woman, where are they? No one has condemned you. She said, no one, Lord. And Jesus said to her, neither do I condemn you. Let's not miss that. The Son of God says to her, neither do I condemn you. And then he said, go. From now on, sin no more. And at the end of the sermon, Carlos, he did something I really liked. He said, if you were here, he said, there's some of us in the room today, right? We really like that go and sin no more part of that verse. That's the part that we resonate with. We're okay with telling people okay, I'm going to drop the stone, I'm not going to judge you, but don't you sin no more. Don't stop that. And then there's some of us, I think we tend to maybe lean the other way a little bit. We sort of like that part of the verse that says, neither do I condemn you. We like that part. We like to say, I'm not going to judge you. It's all good. Maybe you should stop trying to do that. But hey, it's up to you. Can I just ask you, which side do you lean more to? When it comes to judging and, thinking about other people's sin or see somebody doing something they shouldn't do. Where do you tend to lean? Are you willing to I'm sure I'm willing to drop the stone, but not without a good stern stop doing that. Stop believing that. Stop saying that. Stop thinking that way, right? Or are you more willing to drop the stone and sometimes you don't even say anything? Hey, go ahead, believe what you want as long as no one's getting hurt. I know everybody else is doing it. Which way are you? I think in reading the book and listening to Carlos, I came to the conclusion, I think I'm pretty good at dropping the stones. I realize it's God's role to judge, to not mine. But however, I think what I've sort of realized is that, at least for me, when it depends on the issue which side I lean. Because there's sometimes I can drop the stone, but I want to say something. And then there's other issues, I'm no big deal. See, I think what I discovered is when it comes to really judging these things, these issues, sin, I think what I've learned at least, I've got to drop the stone. The next thing I need to do is shut my mouth. And what I really need to do is listen. And I need to attempt to learn and understand what's really going on. But then I've got to lead with love. You know, there's obviously, right, there's so many topics we could have chosen in a series like this that we could have addressed in a series like this. And I just want to say, like, if you find yourself at the end of the series saying, like, I can't believe they didn't choose this one. Like, this is the issue that needs to be confronted. Northway getting all wimpy, won't confront that, won't talk about it. If you find yourself saying that, let me say this as pastorally as possible. Whatever that issue is, you might want to look down at your hand because there's a rock with that issue written on it that you've probably been throwing some fastballs at people. And I'm just saying, this is what I learned, and this is maybe for you, maybe, shut your mouth and listen and learn and try to understand. But do it all in love. Do it all out of love. That's what I've been learning. In week 3 of this series, so next week, we're going to talk about addiction. Specifically, the addiction, you know, the judgment that comes around people that have been struggling with substance abuse. And then this week, like Carlos said in the video, mental health. But specifically, hear me, we're going to talk about depression and suicide. Lots of mental health issues, I know. We can't cover them all. I'm going to sort of focus in there. Here are some alarming statistics. 40% of people say they are more stressed and anxious than they were a year ago. Depression rates are up 33% in the last 5 years. 1 out of 8 of people over the age of 12 have used some form of antidepressant. Suicide rates are up 28% in the last 20 years, and among girls ages 10 to 19, suicide rates have spiked 70% in the last 8 years. There is something going on in our nation. And I just want to say, first of all, there's no simple answers to it. There's no cliched, simple answers. Some psychologists believe that in this nation, because of our basic needs being met, you know, food and shelter and clothing, it causes us to search for other areas of significance. And that often leads to insecurity and then into stress and anxiety and depression. Some psychologists believe it's just because of technology and social media. It's pulled us away from meaningful relationships. But regardless of why, we have all been touched by this. Depression may be part of your current reality, or it may be someone close to you that is dealing with a challenging mental illness. One of the saddest moments in my childhood, I can remember being a little kid and waking up to like commotion in the house and like my mom crying and like almost like screaming and heading out the door and getting in her car. And I found out that my uncle had taken his life. He had killed himself on his front porch, leaving my 3 cousins, like they're like the same age as me, fatherless. See, we chose this topic and next week topics because they have or will touch probably everyone across all of our locations. You know, there's this fascinating story that's found in the Old Testament book of 1 Kings, and I think it can be helpful for us today. There's a prophet in 1 Kings, and his name is Elijah. Now, a prophet is someone that God trusts. It's someone that God has chosen to speak through. You know, a prophet is somebody that is fiercely committed to God. And in chapter 18 of 1 Kings, I'll just put it this way, Elijah is the man. Like, he's the man. If you know chapter 18, he is the man. Like, I won't go into detail because I don't have time, and plus we've preached on chapter 18. It's probably my favorite chapter in the Old Testament, right? But Elijah, in this chapter, real briefly, he wants to prove to the prophets of a false god, a god by the name of Baal. He wants to prove to their prophets that their God is no God at all and that he serves the one true God. So Elijah, he sets up this epic contest. He has the prophets of Baal gather all of their followers, and then they set up this gigantic altar, and they put this animal sacrifice on it. And then Elijah does the same thing. He gathers up the nation of Israel. He puts this animal sacrifice up on an altar. And the contest is basically going to see which God can light that altar on fire. And first of all, it's the prophets of Baal's turn. And it says they start chanting and calling on their God, and they're doing all this stuff. There's some of them, they're even cutting themselves, they're doing stuff, and nothing's happening. It's like crickets. Nothing's coming down. And it says if you read this, Elijah even starts to make fun of them. It's like maybe your God's on vacation, or maybe he's taking a wee. Like, I'm seriously, that's in there. You can look it up. And then it's okay, Elijah says, okay, my turn. He calls on his God, and boom, like fire comes down instantly, and the sacrifice just evaporates. And then this like huge Israel military victory follows. And like I said, in this moment, Elijah is the man. And then chapter 19. See, we discover that not everyone is celebrating Elijah. That there's a queen named Jezebel that's embarrassed because she followed Baal. And it says this, and she's furious. And in verse 19 too, it says, then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. What she's basically saying is, by this time tomorrow, I'm going to have you killed. And it says that Elijah, he's afraid, and he rose, and he ran for his life, and he came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there, but he himself, he went another day's journey into the wilderness, and he came and sat down under a broom tree, and he asked that he might die, saying, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. So like, hear me on this. This is a trusted prophet of God. He's fiercely committed to God. He is coming off an epic victory. And he has all the signs of a severe depression. See, when it comes to dropping the stones on this topic, I want to be clear about something today. Passionate followers of Christ can suffer from depression, and it's not due to a lack of faith. See, I believe in all my heart, like all of us, we need to trust Jesus more, right? But I do not believe that trusting Jesus more is a tidy and simple remedy for depression. And if that has been your solution to a loved one that has been suffering with depression, just trust Jesus more and you'll get over it. You'll get through it. You got to drop that stone. You've got to stop saying that. And frankly, if you're dealing with depression right now and someone is throwing that stone at you, duck. See, Elijah was experiencing deep fear, grief, and sadness has swept over him. He withdraws alone. He's sensing nothing but hopelessness and despair. He's not eating. He verbalizes that he doesn't even want to live any longer, and he's a prophet. He is fiercely committed and passionate follower of God. Now right, like naturally, all of us, we see sadness and grief as a negative emotion, right? And I think all of us, we see joy and happiness as a positive emotion. And when we're in a conversation with somebody, someone that's expressing like great sadness or grief, we want to rush in and rescue them, don't we? We want to say things like, hey, brighter days are ahead. This will only last for a short time. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, right? When somebody's in a really happy, joyous moment, we don't do that. We don't go up to them and say, lousy days ahead, right? You're only going to experience this for a short time. That's a train, not light coming, right? We don't say that. See, I think as a culture, we try to stuff our sadness and grief down. We're almost encouraged not to express it, not to talk about it. Often I think sadness and grief, it's viewed as like a weakness. And when we do this, psychologists say that it can cause overt depression. That's when we withdraw, we stop talking to people, we cry, but we do it alone. We struggle at work, we fight to just even get out of bed. Or it can cause what they call covert depression. That's when we mask it and we turn to things like alcohol abuse or fits of rage and anger. We become workaholics. We do anything that we can to just numb the sadness. And see, it's bad enough when culture is pressing us to stuff our sadness and grief down. But some of us, we have like this sort of religious layer on top of it. Like maybe you grew up around a religion that says that all God followers must always be just filled with nothing but joy and gratefulness. And like I know that that's true at one level, but it can leave us believing that being a strong God follower and being depressed can somehow not exist side by side. So therefore, it leaves us thinking to ourselves, well, then my faith must be weak. See, and that's why I want to press this again. We cannot miss the point here in this story. This is Elijah that's depressed, that's suicidal. He is a man of great faith, yet he's experiencing crushing depression. So, someone struggling with depression here today, I know you need to hear this. You need to stop throwing stones at yourself. If Elijah can experience this, then so can you. King David, known as a man, right, that was after God's own heart. You know, he said this once, my companions have become darkness. He also said, I am weary with my moaning every night. I flood my bed with tears. Another prophet by the name of Jeremiah said, why was I ever born? Isaiah says this about Jesus. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. The Bible is filled with faithful people wrestling with depression. You know, Elijah, in verse 4, if you picked up on that, he's suicidal. He's saying, it's enough. Now, Lord, hey, take away my life. You know, some of us here today, we've been told a lie about suicide. Religious circles have made a claim that anyone who commits suicide is going straight to hell, that it's an unforgivable sin. I just want to say, if you have a loved one that has committed suicide and someone's throwing that stone at you and you've heard it, it's not true. Read the Bible cover to cover and you won't find it. Because the work of Jesus Christ on the cross covers all sins, period, all forgiven. There's no unforgivable sins. See, I think we also need to stop maybe and drop the stones on some of these other cliched judgments about suicide. You know, I've heard someone say once like, well, suicide, it's so selfish. Man, I don't think it has anything to do with selfishness. See, when a person gets to the point of taking their own life, I think they've determined somehow that it's like they're standing on the ledge of a tall, burning building, and the flames are approaching, and it appears overwhelming to them. But the jump from the ledge represents certain death. And then the terror of possibly dying in the flames becomes so overwhelming that it overwhelms the terror of jumping. See, it's not selfishness, it's hopelessness. And we must find empathy and drop the stones for someone that somehow got to that place. If you are here today and you are considering taking your own life, and based on statistics, as number of people are watching this today, there is someone that is considering taking your own life. If I could get one-on-one with you just for one moment, I am begging you to reconsider. Do not make a permanent decision on a temporary situation. There is someone in your family or a friend that if they knew, they would beg you to please reconsider it. I know it's hard right now because what it is you don't see any way out of the flames, but I promise you there is. You don't have to see a way out to reach out. I've been praying for you as I've been preparing this sermon. I've been praying that God's Spirit would somehow, the power of God's Spirit would work its way into your heart and free you and rescue you from those thoughts. Elijah in this text, he is depressed and he wants to take his life, but God refuses to leave him there. Because in verse 5, it says this about Elijah, and he lay down and he slept under a broom tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, for the journey that you're about to take, it's too great for you. And he arose and ate and drank, and he went on this journey in the strength of the food, 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. And there he came to a cave, and he lodged in it. So he's not out of his depression. He's in a cave right now. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? See what is God doing here? He does not call Elijah selfish. He doesn't say, come on, snap out of it. Look at all I've done for you. Come on. Nor does he give up on him. What does God do? It's beautiful. He gives him space to heal. He brings over several meals. He allows him time to rest. At the right time, he gets him up. He takes him for a walk. See, God understands depression and suicide. Picking up in verse 11, he's still in that cave. And it says, he said, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of a low whisper. And he said, and when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face with his cloak, and he went out and he stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? Do you know someone that is in their own cave right now? And you so badly want them to come out. Maybe you're afraid for them, but maybe if you're really honest with yourself, you're frustrated with them. I just want to say that you know what is not helpful? To create a big wind, right? To create a big storm, to create an earthquake and shake them and put a finger in their face and say, why don't you just snap out of it? Don't you realize how good you've got it? Like, come on, it's time for you to get a hold of your life. When we do that, we're just throwing bold, simple solutions at very complex issues. You know, it wasn't the wind, the fire, the shaking that brought Elijah out of the cave. It was a gentle whisper. How close do you have to have someone's ear so that they can hear a whisper? You've got to be side by side. You've got to be close and intimate with them, right? If you know somebody that's in a cave right now, I just want to tell you, it might start by you just simply getting side by side with them, listening, providing a meal, going for a walk, saying to them, help me understand. Help me. You know, be consistent. Show up. Listen. And assure them that you're never going to leave them. Northway, as a church, we have a God-given responsibility to help people walk out of the cave. We have to be a safe place where people will not be judged for the cave that they were in. A place for those that have struggled with anxiety or depression or even suicidal thoughts, that they're not written off as weak. That they're not disqualified for leadership opportunities or set aside somehow just to be pitied. As a church, we need to display God's character, a God that met Elijah there, and he leaned in, and he did not leave him. It says this next. It says, and the Lord said to him, go. You're ready now. He's saying, return on your way, the way that you came to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive there, he's basically given him this assignment of anointing a king of Syria. And it goes on to say, and then Jehu, another person, that you're going to anoint him the next king of Israel. And then it goes on, and then Elisha. He said that you're not only going to anoint him, you're going to mentor him. because he's going to be the next prophet. God gave Elijah in this moment work that mattered, right? And he's basically saying, hey, I know you've been in this season of sadness and depression, but I'm not done with you. And if you're here today and you've been in that cave of depression, God is not saying he's done with you. He'll never say that, and neither are we as a church. He has a purpose for your life. He has work that matters. You might not see it yet, but it's true. What does God do in these couple simple verses? One, God gives him something to do. Go back the way that you came and anoint these next couple kings. Church, we have to help people out of that cave by giving them something meaningful to do. Secondly, God gives him a relationship that matters, right? God told Elijah to go and find this one guy named Elisha and mentor him, pour into him. You know, he's going to be someone that you can share your struggles and your successes with, right? He had him go choose Elisha. And in doing so, it confused people for the rest of history. Elijah, Elisha, they two people, they're the same person. What you one do, right? Why didn't he have him go anoint like Fred? Then we would have known the difference. We got Elijah and Fred. There's no confusion there, right? But he didn't. See, as a church, we've got to help people connect in meaningful relationships. And then the third thing, God, he gives them an opportunity to bring meaning to his pain. Those of you in a cave, I'm not going to dismiss your pain or what put you there or what's kept you there. I know it's painful, but God wants to bring meaning and purpose from the pain and make it part of your story. You need to tell it to others, to help others that are experiencing similar pain. Those of you that are in a cave, crushed with depression, whatever has put you there, man, you need to share that with someone else that's there and help them walk out with you. How do I know that Elijah chose to tell his story? How do I know that he told people about his depression and his suicidal thoughts? Because we have his story today. There was nobody else with him in the desert that day. So Elijah willingly told others that he was in a cave, and then he thought that there was no way out but God. And I'm telling you right now, if you think you're in a cave and there's no way out, yeah, there is no way out but God. Powerful words. How does the story conclude? Chapter 19, verse 19, says Elijah, so he departed from there. He chose to go, chose to leave the cave. See, no one is more qualified to heal your soul than the one that created it. My favorite verse in all of the New Testament, Jesus says, come to me. All of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. The man of sorrows said that. He's basically saying, hey, I know pain. I know loss. I know darkness. But you know what else he's saying to you right now? I know when you're going to laugh again. I know when you're going to find purpose again. I know when you're going to experience love again. There is someone right now at our location, a young gal that is in this spot right now. And I want you to hear this from me. Someday, you're going to meet a man that's going to love you so well. You're going to have kids, and you're going to find your purpose. I don't know who you are, but you've got to come out of that cave because God's got a promise for you. He's got a purpose for you on the other side. There's someone in this room, a young man that feels like his life is done. God's got a plan for you. He's got a purpose for you. Come out of that cave. Let me just pray for us. God, I thank you for being a God that doesn't give up on us, even in these really low points of life. Lord, I would ask that you would help us, that even if we don't see a way out, that we would reach out. I lift that up in your Son's name. Amen.